Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Today I'm going to talk about the redwood tree. Redwood is something I've always been interested in, somewhat fascinated in. It's one of the oldest and largest living things on Earth. But until recently I'd never been before. I'd never been to an old growth stand. I'd been to the redwoods up in the hills above Santa Cruz, but those are younger, those are new generation. I think I'd driven by them at Big Sur. I'd never actually walked through an old growth stand until recently. And when I did, it was a powerful experience. So last weekend, my family and I took a little road trip. We went up to Healdsburg, California. It's about 3 to 5 hours north of Monterey, depending on how much traffic you hit in San Fran. Not whether, you will, but it depends on how much traffic you hit, and it's up near about an hour north of San Francisco. Our Airbnb hosts told us about a nearby Redwood State Park, so we decided to go on Friday during the day. I had a race on Saturday, so we had a down day on Friday. We decided to spend it walking through the woods. Note that the state park there is near wine country, so if you're up in the area and big trees aren't your thing, maybe wine is, so there's something for everybody. So we went out on Friday and walked through the old growth stand in Armstrong Redwoods State Natural Reserve there. It was quite a good way to spend the day with the family, and we saw a lot of interesting things. Here on the right, this is Colonel Armstrong tree. It's one of the more famous or more well-known trees in the park. Try not to be distracted by the very cute toddler here up front or the very handsome man sitting in front of the tree. But if you can, and if you look in the background, you might be able to make out a tree. That's the Colonel Armstrong tree. It's one of the biggest ones. It's 1,400 years old, almost 15 feet in diameter. It was quite something to behold. And the picture doesn't really do it justice. To see it firsthand was pretty amazing. So this was like I said, a powerful experience for me. I'm going to talk a little bit about redwoods themselves, and I'll go back and finish up by talking about kind of what feelings this evoked in me. So the redwood tree itself is part of the sequoia family. There's 3 different species in the sequoia family. The coastal redwoods, which were the ones I was in, the sequoias, which grow in the Sierra Nevada, and then there's another one that's kind of obscurely related. It's in China, this guy right here, much smaller than his 2 older brothers. The coastal redwood is only found in one place in the world, and that's along the coast of Northern California. Its range runs from basically the southern edge of Oregon all the way down to Big Sur, just south of Monterey. So it's relatively unique in the world. It has a very limited and very distinct range here because there's a very distinct type of climate that it grows well in. It can get as old as 2,200 years old and grow up to 365 feet, possibly more. Up to 365 is the common figure, though. Interesting note, though, 2,200 years old, although that's very old, it's by no means the oldest tree in the world. There are several other older ones. The oldest living known tree is also native to California. It's the bristlecone pine, which grows out in the desert. Almost the oldest species, or the oldest specimen right now, is almost 4,900 years old. Pretty amazing. Also, the redwood tree is very resilient. In order to live over 2,000 years, you kind of have to be pretty resilient. But also it can survive being chopped down, unlike other trees. If any of you guys have been up to Santa Cruz in the redwoods up there, you may have seen what are known as fairy rings. It's basically a giant old redwood stump surrounded by a ring of new young redwoods growing around it. So when the redwood is logged and it's cut down, the root system stays alive, and it sprouts. Basically says, all right, boys, let's put up some new trunks, and sprouts a bunch of new trunks around the original stump. So it creates this interesting phenomenon where you have an old big stump surrounded by a ring of new redwoods that are part of the original organism. So that is a little bit about the tree itself. And now back to my visit. Quick question: who here has been to an old growth redwood stand in Northern California? Very good. Fred, what do you think? How did it make you feel being in the presence of these?
As you said, it's very inspiring. There's one in the John Muir section just north of San Francisco, and there's a mist throughout that is very enfolding and very soothing. You can go across little bridges, you can spend time with family, you can just meditate, but it certainly gives you a feeling, gives me a feeling of awe of nature.
Absolutely. I felt the same way. There was something about how I felt while walking through this old growth that was almost sublime, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I'm going to get a little mushy here. I wouldn't call myself a tree hugger. Even if I was, you can't really hug these trees. They're too big. You can maybe at best get spread eagle up against the side of them. But back to kind of the way I was feeling, why did I feel this way? What feelings was this that the redwoods were evoking in me? As I thought about it, I had an epiphany. It was for the same reason that I like going to the mountains. The redwoods make you feel small. Being in the presence of redwoods makes you feel small, much like being in the mountains. It's at once very humbling and very uplifting. You get this very subtle sense of being in the presence of natural majesty, more so than other environments I've been in. To kind of use an analogy, for any of you that when you were a kid, if you had an old grandpa or great uncle or an old neighbor that you looked up to that had been around for a long time, you'd sit on their knee and look up at them and just think, wow, this guy's old and he knows a lot. And that's kind of the same feeling I get being in the redwoods, being in the presence of these trees. It is definitely humbling and it's awe-inspiring. So in conclusion, I do think it's important today that we regularly recognize the grandeur of nature, and that we regularly remind ourselves that no matter how important we think we are, we're actually very small. So when you get a chance, take a walk through a stand of old growth redwoods and be awed and humbled. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm evaluating Brad's epiphany that he had walking through a strand of old-time redwoods. He gave us a better word for that. And as his mentor, he had been writing to me about this speech and what he wanted to look at. He's doing the Pathways Manual, and he's doing Presentation Mastery number 3, Evaluation and Feedback. And all I could find in the manual was, you present a new speech or the same speech that incorporates feedback you've received previously. And Arnie had evaluated him a few weeks ago and told him about the position of his hands while talking and hooking the audience and time management he wanted to look at, and he wanted to look at being or pretending he was relaxed. And he did a good job at following Arnie's feedback. With his hands, he didn't, have prayer motion, but he did hold on to the lectern enough. He also looked comfortable, especially as he got further into the show. As far as having an audience hook, I could suggest one, and I would suggest it for the rest of the speech, which was very educational and beautiful with the slides, and I love the word language that you use, sublime, and your true epiphany about the redwoods and 4,000 years and 2,000 years making you feel small and humble. That was great. One of the things I would have done better is open for a hook with that slide of the ring of redwoods and walk through it, looking at it with awe and modeling a little more, maybe with some more vocal variety, even whispering. Oh, how can this be? I'm here in 2018. That was here in minus 2018. Okay, the two slides that had pictures next to them, you held them up a little long. I would have put a few more slides in there. And I heard a couple ohs, ums and ahs, but overall, it was a very moving speech that could have been made more moving. He asked to look for time management, and he was right on target, okay? By modeling that humility and that presence. So, thank you very much. I recommend to everyone that they go to a restaurant in Boulder Creek called Cosa Nostra, fabulous Italian food, and you can sit literally in a ring of redwoods from a cut redwood tree. Thank you.